Hey everyone, I'm Somya Kaushik and I'm the founder of EsqMe and a former litigator in New York City. Today I'm here with Mark Cohen. He is a writer for Forbes, specifically on global legal marketplace. Mark is a former trial attorney and a managing partner of a large firm across the nation. He currently is a lecturer and guest speaker all around the world on topics like legal news, legal technology, and the advancement of the practice of law. So thank you for being here, Mark.
Pleasure, Somya. And you forgot to say we're friends.
Oh, and we are very close friends. So thank you. And why don't you
Pleasure.
give a little bit about yourself and your capacity as a writer for Forbes?
Sure. So I've always thought that if you can't write well, you have to write prolifically, and I write prolifically. I've written about 150 articles on different topics related to the global legal marketplace, but my particular interests really are improvement of legal delivery and also on legal culture, which I think is very, very important. It informs things like diversity and access to justice and all sorts of really, really seminal aspects of what it is to be a lawyer and what the legal profession should stand for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think legal culture is a good way of explaining how it is that we have so much in common.
Right.
We're different generations, we're different
Are we?
genders.
Oh, I hadn't noticed.
And we've practiced in different areas of the country, but we still have a very important topic that is common and sort of unfortunate that it still persists. And I think that that sort of segues into the main topic that
Sure.
we wanted to discuss is the role gender plays in the legal practice in our day and age today.
Yep. Well, I had hoped, Somya, that when I started my practice about 40 years ago, and I noticed that that women were really truly relegated to second-class status in the law. Not only were there fewer of them, not only were there remarkably few partners, but also I noticed even when I was a young assistant U.S. attorney, there was definitely a gender bias within the office. That is, male assistants, it wasn't about money, it was so much more about what kind of cases you were assigned, what the perception was that you could be as a trial lawyer, and it continued, frankly, into private practice, but I would have hoped that long before now, we wouldn't have to be having the discussion we're about to have.
Yeah, and so this topic, unfortunately, is still here in my generation of practicing law. I was a litigator and still do practice in New York City along with running EsqMe, but this topic sort of came about after a post on LinkedIn that I wrote about an experience I had recently within the past month with a potential investor for EsqMe, which is the legal technology company that I'm focusing on currently. And in that post, I wrote briefly about my experience and how the investor openly and honestly told me his opinion about investing in me and EsqMe, and flat out said that I'm not going to be investing in you or your company because you are a woman. So that started a lot of emotions inside of me, started really turning gears in my mind about how is this possible in 2017, and I knew this existed in the legal world and practice of law, but I didn't know it was going to follow me into my journey as an entrepreneur.
Well, unfortunately, as you know, there have been a spate of recent class action lawsuits against large law firms by current and former female partners about sexual discrimination. There have been a spate of articles about what's going on, particularly in Silicon Valley, and the misogynist behavior of so many private equity individuals. But what is it about your experience and the article that you posted that you think captured the imagination of almost 750,000, that's 750,000 readers? Why do you think that your story resonated the way it did?
I thought about that a lot when I posted it. It didn't occur to me that this was going to create so much buzz. It was really meant for me to just express my experience, and I was really astonished that I had something like that so blatantly in front of me. So when I wrote it, I did not expect it. So when I got 500 shares and people from all over the world messaging me about it, it started making me realize that I think it hits a accord amongst everybody, even men and women, that one, we're very shocked that this still exists. And, we feel as a society, as a culture, we've advanced that. And there's so many things that advance us, whether it's technology or it's just awareness and knowledge. But you still get these reality checks. So I think, one, everyone is shocked that it was so open and out there. And the other thing I think is people don't talk about it that much.
So maybe you could step a half step back and tell our listeners what exactly happened to the extent that you feel comfortable talking about it. And obviously you're a lawyer, and I don't think you're necessarily going to name names. But tell us, share your experience.
So, in this stage with EsqMe, we're looking for investments to grow and scale, and it's a concept that is fairly simple. It's a legal document marketplace that's free for solos and small firms, or any lawyer for that, to sign on and buy and sell their legal documents with other lawyers. And we've slowly in this past year expanded quite a bit, and in order to be able to maintain all of that and continue growing, we needed an investor. So I went to this investor meeting and I sat down, and it really was a short conversation. It was very much what I had written about. It was very frank and to the point that, we're looking at a couple other companies, and to be honest, we're not going to be looking into yours anymore. We're not going to be investing because you're a woman, and we think that your priority is just going to be having a family and being a mother. So that presumption is, in 2017, I didn't think that was the presumption, and it's definitely refutable. But the other thing that really bothered me about that was that I wasn't even given the opportunity to answer those types of concerns for an investor.
So I guess in lawyers' terms, the burden shifted to you,
Yeah.
right, to show cause why you are not going to immediately get pregnant, drop out of the business, and otherwise dissipate the funds that would otherwise be going to a male maybe with the same concept.
Yeah, and I think that if the conversation was approached in a different manner, I wouldn't be so offended and I wouldn't have been so shocked. Those are concerns for an investor. It's their money, and I understand that they want to know what my commitment is and what it is that I see in the next 5 years or 10 years.
What do you say to someone who might suggest, well, this is just an outlier? This was one person who just, for whatever reason, didn't like what you were selling, or maybe just for whatever reason didn't care so much for you and decided that this would be a glib but maybe not terribly thoughtful way of dismissing the opportunity.
Yeah, I think that, certainly after the post, I realized on LinkedIn that there's a big, large community of people who do not believe that way. And so maybe this is, his way of saying he wasn't interested for whatever other reasons that he may have. But it still surprised me that would be the go-to excuse or the reason that you would voice.
And tell us a little bit of why it surprised you individually. Maybe a little bit about your family background, whether or not you experienced any kind of gender bias in school, or in your personal life.
Yeah, I mean, throughout, I think everybody experiences some type of bias, whether it's based on gender or race or anything really. Everyone feels it to some degree, so I've definitely felt it. And having been in litigation before, I have really experienced it. I've gone into courts where people are calling me honey, and the judge is saying, the judge is calling me honey, or opposing counsel is saying, that's a really cute argument. But
cute.
I get cute and honey, and I wrote in that LinkedIn post.
I've never been accused of having a cute argument.
I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but so.
I don't think it's inappropriate.
Yeah,
I think there are other adjectives that might capture it better.
Yeah, so I've definitely experienced it in my professional career, and for a while people said, "Listen, this is just the way it is. You're in a male-dominated field. It's just the way it is, and you got to kind of have thick skin and deal with it." So for the first couple of times where I encountered these situations, I didn't know how to handle it. I was very much listening to that, just get over it, keep moving forward. And so I listened to it for a little bit, but I realized that I kept gaining so much experience and knowledge, not only in law and practicing and being in court and doing trials, but also with EsqMe, I was able to learn so many things from scratch, whether that's marketing or corporate governance or, from taxes to the investor round. Those are all things I had to learn. So when I got to this point and the door was shut before I even had a conversation, I was shocked. I was like, but I know so much and I've learned so much.
So basically, you feel that the door was shut just because of your gender or perhaps because of your appearance, even before you could get to the merits of your case.
Yeah, and that's what I think is the most disheartening part of that.
And when you said that, you learned all these things kind of on the fly, didn't you learn any of those things in law school? And I'm asking you rhetorically.
I wish I had, but there was a good basis in law school for, understanding a lot of things that we get into as an entrepreneur, whether that's from, licensing and IP issues or that's with, shareholders and investors. So, there's a little bit, but being an entrepreneur is about putting yourself into everything your
Right.
business goes through.
And so what about the person who says, well, this is more of an entrepreneur issue than it is a lawyer issue? You're telling us that you've had this kind of problem or challenge in both realms.
Yeah. And that's why after the LinkedIn post, I wrote a formal article, which I'll be posting soon. But the article kind of dives a little more into my journey experiencing these types of discrimination and comments through my litigation, career, also bleeding into the entrepreneurial journey. So I started to dive into how that, because I've experienced those across both, it's built me up as a person to be able to say, this isn't how it's going to go.
And as you know, I have two young daughters who are both strong, powerful women. What would you tell them, not them individually, but young women generally, who are embarking on a professional career, particularly with respect to maybe going into the law or going into legal technology or some form of legal entrepreneurship? What would you tell them to be prepared for?
The best advice I would give is that you really need to be confident in who you are, because it's going to be tested every step of the way. And there are going to be people out there, whether you're starting as a lawyer or you're starting out as a legal tech entrepreneur, whatever it is, in fact, there are going to be, if you're a young woman, there are going to be challenges and there are going to be hurdles and people telling you the way it should be done and that you're not probably capable of doing it. So if you know that you have the knowledge and the experience and you've worked hard, then you can sort of build that confidence inside you that I touch upon in the article, and I've sort of named it strong grace. That,
Right.
It's not the yelling, the kicking, and the screaming, because sometimes that does us a disservice, but it is about knowing who you are and your core and standing up and being able to not perpetuate that type of culture.
Well, and then in my generation, and I think it persists today, I had a female law partner who was a very, very superb trial lawyer. Her biggest challenge always before a case was, what do I wear?
Yeah.
And I wish I was being facetious about it, but I'm not. And she was very tough, very thorough, but I know that people would very often describe her as being a bitch. Whereas I think I was equally tough. Maybe I had a slightly different style, but nobody ever called me a bitch or the male equivalent of that.
Yeah.
It was very gender-driven. If a guy were to comport himself the same way in the courtroom, he would be a tough trial lawyer.
Yeah.
If a woman were to do it, she would often be described as a bitch or something, even less flattering.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's sort of what I've talked about in this article, that men and women have strength, but they're very different. And it doesn't need to always be compared. That women have a sort of strong grace, an eloquent way of being strong and getting the point across. And, at some points you do need to be tough and you need to stand up and vocalize. And there are other times in which, taking a step back and actually, letting things happen and observing and then taking a stance does us a little better too.
Well, I love your expression, strong grace. I think it's one of those oxymoronic phrases that's very powerful and really captures it. And I think Actually, I think that there is a male equivalent. It's maybe not quite so necessary, but certain men are said to be in touch with their feminine side. And I think that can be very powerful too,
Yeah.
particularly with female juries. What surprises me, Somya, is that lawyers are in the persuasion business. Whether they're trial lawyers, whether they're transactional lawyers, it doesn't matter, right? You have to persuade multiple people. You have to persuade a prospective client that you are the right lawyer for the job.
Right.
You have to persuade
The jury.
the jury.
The
You have to
judge.
persuade the judge. You have to persuade the other side that best not to, go to trial with you, and on and on and on. And it just strikes me as being really sad and a great flaw in legal culture. To come back to the culture word, that here it is, 2017, and we're still having this conversation.
I know, yeah. I mean, and just to go back really quickly on the toughest question for her was what to wear. That still is a thing, I've had to have that experience myself, and like I said, that there are certain things that people, certain strengths that we all have, and if we learn how to kind of tap into them, become self-aware, then we don't let these biases and this discrimination affect us so much.
Well, I know for a man, it's really pretty simple. You get up, you put on a shirt and tie and a suit, you go to court. Very little else. And with a woman, of course, and I see that with my wife, who's in another field. She runs an executive search firm, but she often has to come in and ask me, and she's been in the business for 25 years, and will say to me, do you think that this is too tight? Do you think this is too short? Do you think? These are problems that men don't confront typically. And so the mere fact that a thoughtful, experienced woman is asking that suggests to me that there is a real issue out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is an issue, and it's very hard to change it, and people don't want to be the one to always, take the stance, but, it's there, and that's just human psychology also.
Well, now that women comprise more than 50% of law school students, and I don't know at this point whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's another topic. Do you think that legal culture is going to be changed much? Do you think that 10 years from now we're going to be having this same discussion?
I mean, I hope not. That's the point of writing all this and having these discussions. And the great thing about that post was that people from all over the world had something to say or an experience that was similar. And so awareness is there, and I think it's about awareness and knowledge, and then also learning, being given the tools or the method in which we can actually make a change.
Well, I think also, having read your post, of course I'm biased, but I think the notion of the strong grace is a very powerful one, because I think so much of effective lawyering and persuasion is about finding the right way, the right words, the right tone to communicate a thought.
Exactly.
And this is a very sensitive topic, both for women and for a lot of men who have a knee-jerk reaction. I don't want to hear this. Or she's a crybaby, or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. Somebody on the thread for the post said, you should have screamed at him, and you're a lawyer, and you could have just went off on him. And I could have, and that's one way, and that's not the right or wrong way. But for me personally, I've been down this road, and I've had my arguments, and I've had my reactions more that geared towards that kind of way. But that's the process in which I'm going through having experienced this for the past couple of years. I've sort of cultivated that strong grace in myself, and I'm continuously trying to, that when I get into those types of positions, I find that right tone. I find the right pitch of your voice.
Right.
I find the right, it's sort of being aware of everything that it is, to make your point very clear and to the point without causing any extra drama that may take away from the point.
Well, yesterday I was at an event with a speaking to a number of general counsel. It was hosted by the outgoing and incoming presidents of the ABA bar, both of whom are women, both of whom do have strong grace.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, do you think the ABA does enough to foster, what we're talking about, and an awareness that there continues to be a problem in our profession?
Yeah, I don't know too much about the efforts that the ABA is doing at this point. So if you know more, probably it'd be great to hear it. I think this comes from a more personal level, on an individual basis. Women who feel this way should really harbor their inner confidence and be okay with walking away from a situation that presents itself this way, or taking a stance in a graceful way, but a very strong way, like I said. So my approach is a little more individualistic, but I'd love to hear about whether the bar associations and other organizations are doing things to help it.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the ABA, is very concerned about diversity. I know that the ABA is very concerned about women's initiatives and equal pay. But I keep coming back. Maybe it's because when I was an undergraduate and even as a graduate student, I studied anthropology. And I know just how important a culture is. And you can change the numbers, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, that's affirmative action, right? That is a policy. Whereas a cultural commitment, diversity is really a cultural commitment. It's saying, what kind of a profession, what kind of a society do we want to have? And I think that the legal profession still has a ways to go, sadly, in my mind, in terms of that direction.
Yeah. So let me ask you, do you think it's a legal, sort of a regulation and laws type of fix, or is it a psychology, behavioral understanding fix that we need to go through, or both?
I think it's more the psychological and the sociological than it is the regulatory.
Right.
I don't think that you can regulate a respect.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think we're talking about respect. And I think we're talking about considering someone first as a professional rather than by their gender. Or as a human being. Yes, right. Yeah. That absolutely is the threshold.
Yeah.
But, in a professional context particularly, I think that we have not yet evolved to a point where people will say, well, she's had the same training that I have. She's had to pass the same bar exam that I did, etc., etc., etc. And perhaps she brings different experiences to what she's doing, which is very important and very effective. Same way that, I think just because I have been in the field for 40 years, hopefully I've learned something, but I think I'm continuing to evolve even at this point in my career, which is one of the reasons why I teach. Students teach me a lot. But I think that, no, I don't think that regulation is the answer. I really don't.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I do think that education, and again, I don't think you can force feed these attitudes, but I think that law schools, for instance, might be wise to, have some sort of a course that speaks to some of these issues.
Yep.
And why is it that in the profession that, women still only make 88 cents on the dollar? Why is it that only 4% of the largest law firms have female managing partners? Why?
And also, how? How do we change that?
Yes.
It's the next generation of people that are coming into the field that, one, has to be prepared for what the field is like, truly, and then how it is that they make the advancements, both culturally and legally. So having courses on that would absolutely be ideal. And I think it doesn't take a lot to put something like that together.
Right.
And it addresses the issue. Like I said, the post was so shocking to me that people were saying, thank you for sharing your experience. And even just sharing the experience made me realize that this isn't maybe talked about enough, or it needs to be addressed better. So I think law school is a good place to start that change.
Yeah. Well, I applaud you not only for having the courage to be able to, have that strong grace, but also to be able to share it in a way that has so clearly resonated with so many people.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's great.
Yeah.
So I guess we continue the discussion on another day.
Yes, thank you.